Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a podcast or vodcast if you're watching us, with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services for H-season users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm 67 years old, just about a month now. And I've collected a great group of friends from around the country to join us to talk about Apple and how we can use it as seasoned citizens. So let's see who we've got on the panel today. Let's go to the group. And why don't we start out with Gary?
Gary. I'm Gary Shirk. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm 87 and grateful to be part of this group.
Bob?
I'm Bob Wood. I'm from Tucson. I am 70-something, and Marty, don't ask me again, 70 what, because I don't remember. 70-something is close enough. I've been in doing Apple stuff since System 6.8.
So you were 4 years old then, is that correct?
No, thank you. I was 8.
All right. Okay, so you're finally owning up to your age. Peter?
I'm Peter Petto. I'm 72 years old, a double retiree. I was a foundryman, and following that, a high school math teacher. I began my journey into all things Apple in 2006, and I continue to love and use a large assortment of Apple devices and services each and every day.
And finally, Chris is with us.
Yes, I'm Chris Wesselman. I've been around Mac since 1984. And and I had the good fortune to work at Apple for a while. And my training came exclusively through the user groups. I was totally self-taught, as a lot of us at our age were. And so I have a big debt to the user groups.
So tonight, we started this trend about talking about troubleshooting, and I think that horse is about ready to turn into glue. And this might be the last show just around troubleshooting, but particularly we're going to talk about Perplexity.ai tonight. And just a little bit for users who don't know about what Perplexity is. Perplexity.ai is kind of its own standalone app or web app. There's a free version that's available at no cost. There is a paid version, which has all sorts of added benefits to it, some secret sauce and things like that in terms of in-depth types of searches. The paid version is $20 a month or $200 a year. Just recently, I found some ads, and if I find one that looks good, I'll put it in the show notes, that gives a $50 or gives 50% off on Perplexity. So, you buy in for the whole year at half that cost of $200. And I've seen one at 40%. And so I'll see if I can find something to throw in the show notes for listeners who might be interested. But the free version is just as good a valuable asset. Does unlimited quick searches. You can do 5 pro searches a day, which would be the searches that you would get all the time if you had the paid pro version of it. The paid version gives you up to 300 pro searches a day. It also has access to other advanced AI models like GPT-4, Omni, Claude, and Grok, and Llama 3. Does file analysis of PDFs and CSVs and images, has dedicated support, and also gives you updated information as you need it. The way it gets its information is to kind of search the internet in real time and find authoritative sources like articles, websites, and journals, provides inline citations if you're using the pro source, the pro version that gives you some verifiable citations if you need it. Information from the user is supposedly protected. It collects all types of information usage statistics, user account details, and search inquiries. But in terms of who's using it, there's anonymity according to this. You can also opt out of data retention by modifying the settings so they can't keep your data. In some cases, unless you do that, it may share your user data with various providers and advertiser and service providers. So they have some of that piece of your information and the types of questions you're asking. It's conversational, like large language models, like ChatGPT, if you've done that. And it summarizes the results, as I said, with inline citations. I've been using a lot of ChatGPT, and that's probably where I've really gotten my flight hours on these things. And Perplexity is another very good source. Gary and Peter both have used it and like it as a source, and they'll have their chance to talk about that as we get a little as we get to hear each person's experience or reactions. So maybe it's a good time to kind of go around and ask the question, what's your experience with Perplexity? And we can start with Bob on that.
Well, this won't take long. I have no experience with Perplexity.
No experience.
No experience.
All right. You're right. It didn't take long. Chris?
So I've used it for a couple of searches. There were getting a new Indian casino here in Tucson at a major boulevard intersecting with the freeway. And I was just curious because I hadn't seen any information. So I typed in New Indian Casino in Tucson at I-10 and Grant, and it came back with all sorts of information, construction planning. I mean, it had a real wealth of information from different sources, Choice Hotels and Facebook and more, and Casino del Sol, which owns it. And it was a very different approach for me than I'm used to with something like Google. Another search I ran had to do more with my distant master's degree. And I was asking about what are the future possibilities for the old Soviet Far East, given the geopolitical situations going on today. And it was very interesting what the answers were. And I was able to do 3 or 4 different follow-ups in different directions. And it was citing sources like the Wilson Center, Modern Diplomacy, RDL, which I'm not sure what that is, Global Affairs. Later on, when we searched on agriculture, it branched into Wikipedia and the Dallas Fed at some point for some economic information. And it can be, on the one hand, very entertaining for me, to sort of follow. It's kind of like a really nicely designed rabbit hole. And it can be very interesting to follow along. The other thing that Perplexity has started doing is sending me articles every day, that like 3 or 4 articles that it thinks I'd be interested in. And so far, at least one a day has been quite interesting. So that's sort of been my experience so far. And I think all of these models, I've used ChatGPT probably a little bit more myself. And I think they all bring value, and they're probably all worth checking out.
So,
I'm not
Chris,
sure about the pay part, but
yeah. Have you, that's what I was going to, so you're not using a paid model, you're using the free model, and you're getting all of that information that you described. Yeah. And you've had some good success with it. I'll share with you, I probably, because I was looking at various AI models in preparation for a lot of talks that I've given, I've settled on ChatGPT because that seems to be the one that people are being drawn to. And now with Apple products going in that direction, I found it useful to be able to just focus on ChatGPT. So I returned to Perplexity, just still trying to figure things out. And then I got that great deal, and I told Gary about it, and Gary got the great deal, and Peter kind of mentioned it and tested it out himself, and he got the deal. So I started playing with it more often. And I've had some up and down experiences with it. And it might be that I'm not using it the proper way. It might that I haven't spent enough time with it. It could just be the servers at the time that I've been asking. But, I do another podcast called Vision Profiles, and I thought I'd test it out by saying, locate all of the articles that were produced in the last week. So because it's a weekly podcast, I want the material sort of from week to week. And I said, find whatever articles you can find. And it gave me a batch of articles, and some of them were from the last week, but more of them were extended from months ago. So I'm like, this is not what I asked it. So I asked it again, and and I said, no, please restrict this to this period of time. And I still got articles that were a month old. So I was a little frustrated with it. Now, at the beginning of this show, I rattled off all the stuff that about Perplexity AI. How did I get that information? Did I go to their website and read it? Did I take extensive notes? No, I asked a question of Perplexity to tell me about Perplexity and put some conditions in it. I got to tell you, the first time I ran it, it just hung up. It just it couldn't answer its own identity, which I thought was kind of funny. And I quickly copied and pasted my prompt out of that and put it in Claude, because as it turns out, ChatGPT was down. This was just about an hour ago. And so I put it in Claude, and Claude gave me an answer in like 30 seconds and rattled off all those kinds of bullets that I said. And I went back and then tried it again with Perplexity, and it seemed like it was hung up. And then I closed it down and then opened it back up and tried it with Perplexity. And I got the information printed out, but it seemed like the sentences were cut in half. And as I waited, the rest of the sentences popped up, or the rest of the halves of the sentences popped up. So far it's been a little quirky for me, but maybe we'll go to Gary to give a little bit, and then Peter to talk a little bit about their experiences, because they've had more extensive experiences. Gary?
Well, first I wanted to ask you quickly, what is Claude before?
Claude is it the Google? I think it's the Google AI.
From Anthropic.
Oh, from Anthropic. Okay.
Oh, I'll try it, but I'm interested. But I overheard Peter talk about Perplexity and tried it. And before that, Marty, although you gave a moderate summary of ChatGPT, for me, it was kind of overwhelming and maybe scared me enough not to go to it. But with Perplexity, for what my needs are, it's unbelievably. And what I like about it is there's no ads. It's not like a Google search. It gives the answer. And Marty, what my son told me tonight that he picked up from what you said, and this is, of course, obvious, the more detailed question you ask Perplexity, the better answer you get. Plus, as you can do a follow-up. As Peter told me, it saves your history. I asked it just how to change a headlight in a Honda Element. I asked it how to make potato soup. Anything I want to know, I've been using it for little simple things like that. So that's my initial take on it. I think it's great.
Peter?
Yeah, my story's simple and fairly short. I was playing with Arc, which is an alternative browser that has a lot of interesting design ideas, and it favors Perplexity as an alternative to Google for general searches. And the biggest thing I took away from my dabbling with that was not Arc, it was Perplexity. Using Arc converted me to Perplexity as my primary search tool. I've been using it for all routine searches of stuff I know nothing about, generally short ones, for the last 10 or 12 weeks. And I like it.
So I'm going to, yeah. Any other comments? Do you have any other? So let's kind of broaden the discussion on this. If you were going to use Perplexity or any other type of LLM, maybe you have used it to search for troubleshooting. What's that experience like, and how does it work for you? Anybody?
You know what it does also? Marty, could you just get it one up and put it on the screen I thought
Yeah, I
Ecamm
think I
will
can
do
do
that
that.
for you, because what it has is, because the picture then would show the people least that are viewing, and then the others can look. But it had a video, couple videos. It has more than just the answer, and the answer is both quick and to the point. And then, as I said, the more specific. And then, of course, you can ask a follow-on question.
Yeah, I am. I'm working on
Uh,
getting the website up. If I can get that
Well, let me say
going.
something while you're doing that, because I've been using it for general requests. I don't think of it as an LLM, except it is taking, the pages of Google search results that you might get and consolidating them into some bullet points or a very concise answer to your question that I think is better. I know Google sometimes will give you a very nice, concise answer right at the top if you're asking it some kinds of questions. But I think it does a better job in a wider variety of situations than Google. And although it is a large language model and it can do other things, I'm finding it as something I use for general searches. If I want to do something specific, I use the keyword search plugin to Safari to direct my query right to Wikipedia or Amazon or All Music or someplace like that.
Yeah, I have I mentioned this, I think, in a previous show. I'm using Chrome, and Chrome has an extension or an add-on piece that is I guess it's still in beta, called Laboratory or Lab, and
Lab.
it will give you a little Erlenmeyer flask up in the corner, and it will also give you the option of putting your question in the Google search, the search panel. And I have gotten better. I think I've trained myself to write everything about the question I wanted to know, to try and think I've got to present this so a sixth grader can figure out exactly what to look for. And so I put a lot of directions in my search, and Peter, you alluded to the fact that it can come up on that page. Generally, the stuff that comes up on top that gives you bulleted points on what to do or how to solve a problem handles the problem. I don't have to go any further down the page to see it.
Mm.
So it's pretty cool in that way. Let me see if I can switch to a screen, but y'all got to come up with a search question for me for Perplexity. I'm just pushing the buttons here, and let me see if we can get there we go. So what would you like to ask it?
Why don't you ask Gary Search about replacing that light bulb on his car?
Yeah, that was my question. How do you replace a headlight bulb on a Honda 2006 Element?
On a Honda
2006 Element.
Not exactly a Mac question, but we'll go with it.
It was real.
Well, there are Mac questions that are real.
I know that, but
now, is this the paid version, Marty?
Yeah, this is the paid version. I've got mine set up that way.
And Chris, I couldn't really tell the difference either when I was using it. And then, as Peter said, you get 3 or 5 searches, and I'm not doing that many a day for free, pro searches.
So you've got these videos.
Yeah, video. It has the tools. I mean, if you just look at the answer, and really on the video, if you not that I want you to go to it, but if you go to that video, it's another thing, shows you exactly what to do. So
you get the idea there.
Yeah,
very nice.
I mean,
it doesn't look like a MacBook to me, but we'll go with
it. For some reason, I wanted to change these light bulbs to LED. It's just something to do.
It answers Mac questions very nicely as well. I've asked it questions, and it says, go to the settings. It gives you every step. Go to this. Then you'll see it, toggle it, relaunch your app, whatever.
Right. Peter, what was one of the Mac questions we were trying to discuss?
I don't know, but we've used it in the Mac meeting several times.
Yeah.
Well, to Peter's point, it's interesting because like I mentioned last week, there's always support.apple.com or the support app on your iPhone. But if you don't get the answer there and where to go next, right? And that can lead to 3 or 4 searches, half a dozen, trying different things. They weren't the right thing. When you're putting it into an LLM product like this, you're getting a cross section of information that you can quickly sort of scattershoot, including videos as appropriate. And that can be a huge time saver. Cause, in a scattershoot situation, I think we've all been there, but I mean, you can pretty much pick and choose pretty quickly where you want to go. And it could be very effective for searching. I'm definitely going to try that.
Bob, I see the wheels turning. Have you used any LLMs or any of these products to answer questions?
I have used very little of it, but I am interested. I have had a couple of ideas about how to do something or how to ask something, and have yet to really get the answers that I need. I have a couple that deal with images that I'm trying to make or create or have created for me. But we will see as we move forward. I'm happy to learn about it, and I want to learn more.
Okay, cool. For me, I was thinking when Chris was talking, the best, I don't want to say search engine because this is more than that. The best large language model is the one that you can open up quickly, get to, ask your question and get an answer. If there are too many steps between you and an answer on a large language model or these types of AI products, then there's too much between you getting it and you getting an answer to it. But when you use them and you use them correctly and you have quick access to them, just like the example with the Honda headlight, you get some pretty good information back. I use them more for constructing things. So I'm asking questions that include a series of documents that I might put in and looking for ways to pull data from the documents. And so that's my productivity piece with using them. Peter.
Yeah, so for exactly what you want, Perplexity has just introduced a special mode called Spaces. And I put a link that people can see to getting into Spaces, because describing it totally is probably more than we have time for. But it is a way of constructing and collaborating on more detailed inquiries. And it's sort of, actually, it's one thing that Perplexity has had a fail on. They had another feature, which I'm not sure if it's gone or not, or is being rolled into Spaces, called Pages, which was for constructing documents. But in a space, you can insert up to 50 documents that you want to be the primary source of knowledge for what you're going to be looking for. And it will augment those by then going out to the web and annotating and where it's, done that. So it's worth looking at. They are trying to scaffold what's done in other large language models, and it's a little bit in flux because it's a young product, and they try something, and either for reasons of users don't use it the way they expect, or somebody sues them and says, you're scraping my data in a way that's not appropriate, they've been making changes. But I would encourage people to look at the links I put with regard to Perplexity Pages and Perplexity Spaces. And I really like, one thing that works super well is if I do a search for my sister or my wife or something, I can just use that Apple Send To button on their little app, and I send them my search, and it just sends them to a web browser and opens the search I made on their machine. And in general, they go, wow, what is this thing? I want to learn how to use it.
So I saw Chris's hand go up. Chris, you have something to add?
Yeah, that part about putting in the 50 documents and limiting it to that would be a dream come true for a PhD dissertation.
Right.
Because that's exactly what grad students do, right? And to have that ability could be really fantastic as you approach, part of where you're writing and you think, oh, I need to ask this and who has the best thing for that, that could normally take days, whereas could really make a big difference. And that way, where the information, you're controlling the input.
Yeah, that battle is
So
being fought right now in academics. How much we let students do that, and do we let students do that? There is an application called Elicit that is really for academics, and it's pretty remarkable. What it does is it will take any article that you want, or multiple articles, like Peter was saying that you could put multiple articles in and get some text context out. It will tell you to select the categories that you want. Like, do you want to know what the question is, or what the hypothesis was, or who the subjects were? And you just go down a checklist. It will read that PDF and it will create a spreadsheet with all of that information in various columns. So if I'm going through a lot of material and I want to be able to have that stuff contained in a spreadsheet because I'm going to write from it, that stuff is right there with the product. So it's expensive, but it's geared towards academics. The other thing that Peter mentioned that I thought was interesting with Perplexity, there's this concept about agents with AI. Agents are, imagine like you're head of a spy network and you've got agents, and you could say, okay, Agent 006, I want you to go out and I want you to find everything out about this topic as it relates to the politics of it. Then Agent 007, I want you to go out and find out everything about this topic as it relates to the economics of the issue. So you can direct these agents to do particular focused searches and then bring the content back to you in a way that it has particular use or particular meaning. So what you were saying, Peter, it sounds a little bit like agents in the sense of those separate spaces that go out.
Yeah. Well, the spaces are for two things. One is, I think it's part of, helping you do the kind of construction that you were talking about. And I've seen people do a lot of that stuff with ChatGPT, et cetera, but it's less cumbersome because they put a little bit of a framework around how you're doing it that makes it easy for you to see how that works. And then the other thing is these spaces I can say, I want Marty and Gary and Chris and Bob to be part of my investigative team. And you can all log into that space and make additions and comments and all that kind of stuff. So it's they're adding a little bit of social networking, I guess, to it as well.
So imagine that with a group of Mac enthusiasts or a mug. Somebody comes up with a question and you could put multiple people on the process of finding the answer and adding the integrative parts if you're using those spaces with, maybe a team of troubleshooters in your mug.
Right.
And instead of like relying on one person, then having another person say something else and then another person coming in, you kind of have that simultaneous working on a particular problem or question.
So, Marty,
Yeah, Chris,
I've got
go
a
ahead.
question. I have to confess that I'm not far ahead of Bob. About 2-3 weeks ago, both Pete and Gary were talking about this, and it kind of shamed me into it because I had been waiting for Apple's implementation of ChatGPT with Siri. And so far, I've had limited success from that. But I'm sort of curious. There's multiple avenues here. They've got apps. There's an iPhone app. There's I didn't check the iPad, but there is definitely a Mac app, or there's the browsers. Can you guys recommend how people might best be approaching these, or advantages of one over the other?
I use the apps. I find them helpful in that they provide a common interface. And I use the app on all three: iPad, iPhone, and Mac. And I just like the way they've got the controls laid out. You can do the same thing in the web and any web browser that you do in either of those. It's just everything's in a little different place. So
Sure.
I'm sometimes hunting for things.
Okay. Yeah, I'll download the Mac app then. I've used the apps on the iPhone. The other thing I've been noticing already, just in say 2 weeks or so, is that these are evolving, right?
Yeah.
So ChatGPT has got a new version. Perplexity's got that new version today with voice and other things you can do, I think, on the Mac or on the iPhone app. So it's something to keep in mind that this is, the airplane's in the air and it's
Right.
getting built along the way kind of thing. So expect changes. If you come back next week and want to do a search, things may look a little different. And so we'll see how that works out over time. It can be a little frustrating for users. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along with Peter's comments, I'll add, I have a tendency to go to the app. I have the page is one of my tabs in both of my browsers that I use. So I can click on that tab and go to ChatGPT and do whatever I'm going to do with it. I'll probably start organizing that into folders where I can, so I can pull down and make a decision about which AI product I want to use for particular questions, because I've got a variety of them I use. But with the apps on the iPhone, they say it comes with Apple Intelligence. Well, yeah, it does, but you have to switch that on. So go into your system settings, look, and search for Apple Intelligence, and there's a whole bunch of options in that link. One of them is, do you want to give us permission to go out to ChatGPT to answer questions that we can't answer? And do you want that to be, do you want us to ask you if we can do that every time, essentially? And if you have a ChatGPT, you can log into your ChatGPT product, and whether it's free or paid, but then you're essentially sending the stuff that Apple can't do out to your ChatGPT product through Apple. And it's integrated in that way too. So, standalone apps, I think on mobile devices is what I'd say I use. And then, putting and some of these have Mac OS apps, putting the Mac OS apps either in my menu bar or, having them in a browser and doing pull down in order to access them is how to do that. I'm looking at the time. I want to ask if there are any other ideas or final comments about Perplexity or any of the AI products and how you might use them for Apple stuff.
I wonder if anybody's providing some sort of a weekly review of, this week and the LLM models or something to say, well, this came out this week and this is what's going on here. Or should we use the products themselves in saying what's new with ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or, it seems like an opportunity out there. Maybe somebody's already on it.
I've got an answer to that, but I know Bob also had a question, or a comment. So I'm going to switch to Bob first and see if he has to add to that, or he's got a different.
Well, what I'd like to say, Marty, is that I have just successfully used Perplexity for the first time. What I wanted to find out was how to use a green screen as an Ecamm guest, because this thing behind me is pretty boring. And there was a nice answer, and it says that the host has control over that. So maybe we can set that up next time we get together.
Yeah. I thought it did, because I think when I went through some of the controls, it gave me the option to switch certain guests and their cameras to green screens. So we'll try and get that set up for you next time. And also, I think when you're not an Ecamm, you could, depending on the camera that you could have a software interface that'll allow you to do that. Like in Zoom, I think you have the option to switch to green screen and switch your backgrounds to whatever you want to switch to. So, to go back to Chris's comment, I think one of the sources I use is Reddit. Reddit is it's a posting board essentially, but it's organized around different threads. So there is a thread that you can search for different threads, and then you can join those threads so they show up in your feed. And that will tell you the latest on different kinds of products. One that I'm particularly fascinated with the thread is ChatGPT prompts, or it's maybe mega prompts. And people are posting these complicated prompts to do incredible output of information. And I'm just interested in the development of that. So there is a ChatGPT subreddit is what they call it when they have threads. So you can find various subreddits and it will tell you about what's going on with the product or what users have found about the product. I rely on it heavily for Vision profiles because there's a couple of Vision Pro subreddits that I read, and that's where I find out about apps. I find out about a lot of stuff that's going on because users are interfacing with it more than just me interfacing with it. I've got all these thousands of people playing with it and posting stuff about it. So I would recommend, you can't believe everything on it, but, and some of it's pretty humorous and some of it's meant to be satirical or sardonic, but it's a good source to get you thinking about what's going on with these different products outside of the product sending you email about how great they are and what's new with it. So any final comments?
Yeah, one other thing, just following up on what you just said, this prompt engineering stuff could be very useful for our purpose at hand, which is troubleshooting for the Mac. I'm sure there's 2 or 3 or 4 sentences that you could put into, all of these LLMs have like a remix feature where I can make a Mac troubleshooting specialty version of ChatGPT or Perplexity. And what it essentially is 4 sentences that get sent ahead of anything else I might ask that sort of sets a context, the sources and things like that, so that then you get the answers in that style and from those authorities. And, so I'm going to start checking out some of those places you mentioned to see if there's something, that I might want to do. And in fact, I think you can even do that in between the iPhones sending to ChatGPT. I think there's some text somewhere in the iPhone that like somebody's uncovered that's what's part of that prompt when Siri connects to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I'm looking at the next year. I've got a couple of presentations coming up in the spring about AI. And so I've gotten real fascinated about these mega prompts that are really complicated with really good output when you actually run them. Because I want to share that as a resource people can look at if they want to really step up their game. Both of these talks are with academics who are frightful of this. So they kind of have to have an oh wow experience before they realize, well, you better jump in or not. So let's call it a night and call it an episode. And I think I've got some ideas we can talk off camera about what our next episode is going to be about, but I think we're going to get away from the troubleshooting. We live stream here on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube at youtube.com/@Mac, the old Mac gang. Or you can pick up the podcast or video later that night as we produce it, and make sure and check us out either through the live stream, which is fun, and also through the video or through the podcast. And Gary inspired us tonight by sending us to a website, Perplexity. And so that makes the video a little bit more exciting. So as we talk about products and we talk about things that the old Mac gang is needing and using, we're going to probably use the website option occasionally as part of the video, and we'll talk people through it. Our music is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to our group tonight, Gary, Chris, Peter, and Bob, and thank you for being part of the Old Mac gang. See you next time.